Number 1. Ted Bundy was an American serial killer and sex offender who terrorized multiple states in the 1970s. He was responsible for the murders of at least 30 young women, though the actual number could be higher. Bundy was known for his charming demeanor and good looks, which he used to gain the trust of his victims. Bundy's modus operandi typically involved approaching his victims in public places, often posing as an authority figure or using a fake injury to gain their sympathy. Once he gained their trust, he would lure them to secluded areas, where he would then assault, strangle, and sexually abuse them. Bundy's ability to elude capture for years, along with his charismatic persona, made him one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. He was eventually arrested in 1975 and convicted of multiple counts of murder in various states. During his trial, Bundy represented himself and garnered significant media attention. Despite being sentenced to death, Bundy continued to manipulate and charm people, even confessing to additional murders in an attempt to delay his execution. He was eventually executed in the electric chair in 1989 in Florida. Ted Bundy's case continues to fascinate and horrify people, serving as a chilling reminder of the dangers posed by individuals who can blend into society while harboring dark and violent impulses. Number 2. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, was an American serial killer and sex offender who gained notoriety for his heinous crimes in the 1980s and early 1990s. Dahmer was responsible for the murders of at least 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991 in Wisconsin. Dahmer's modus operandi involved luring his victims, often marginalized or vulnerable individuals, to his apartment with promises of money or alcohol. Once there, he would drug them, strangle them to death, and then engage in acts of necrophilia, dismemberment, and cannibalism with their bodies. Despite several brushes with law enforcement, Dahmer managed to avoid detection for years. His crimes were only discovered in 1991 when one of his intended victims managed to escape and alert the police. Upon searching Dahmer's apartment, authorities found evidence of his gruesome activities, including human remains, photographs of his victims, and preserved body parts. Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested, charged, and eventually convicted of multiple counts of murder. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. In 1994, while serving his sentence at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin, Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate. Dahmer's case remains one of the most infamous and disturbing in American criminal history, highlighting the complexities of understanding and dealing with individuals who exhibit extreme and violent behavior. Number 3. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and sex offender who terrorized the Chicago area in the 1970s. He was responsible for the brutal murders of at least 33 young men and boys. Gacy often targeted vulnerable individuals, luring them to his home with promises of employment or money before assaulting and killing them. He buried most of his victims beneath his house, earning him the nickname the Killer Clown due to his occasional performances as a clown at children's parties and events. Gacy's heinous crimes shocked the nation and highlighted the dangers posed by seemingly ordinary individuals. He was convicted in 1980 and ultimately executed by lethal injection in 1994. Gacy's case remains one of the most infamous and disturbing in American criminal history. Number 4. Andrei Chiello, also known as the Butcher of Rostov or the Red Ripper, was a Soviet serial killer who operated in Russia between 1978 and 1990. Chiello was convicted of the brutal murders of at least 52 women, children, and young adults, although he confessed to a total of 56 killings. His victims were typically sexually assaulted, mutilated, and murdered in a gruesome manner. Chiello's crimes were motivated by a combination of sexual sadism and a desire for power and control. Chiello's modus operandi involved luring his victims, often homeless or marginalized individuals, to secluded areas before attacking them. He would then mutilate their bodies, often removing body parts and mutilating their sexual organs. Chiello's crimes instilled fear and panic in the Soviet Union, and his ability to evade capture for over a decade contributed to his notoriety. He was finally arrested in 1990 and confessed to his crimes under interrogation. In 1992, Andrei Chiello was convicted of 52 murders and sentenced to death. He was executed by firing squad in February 1994. Chiello's case remains one of the most infamous examples of serial murder in modern history. Number 5. Pedro Alonso Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, was a Colombian serial killer who operated in South America during the 1970s. Lopez confessed to the murders of over 300 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, though the exact number remains uncertain. Lopez's victims were often impoverished or vulnerable girls between the ages of 9 and 12. He would lure them away from their families with promises of gifts or money before assaulting and murdering them. Lopez would then bury the bodies in shallow graves. He evaded capture for years, moving between countries and taking advantage of the lack of communication and coordination between law enforcement agencies in the region. Lopez was finally apprehended in 1980 in Ecuador, where he was found guilty of multiple murders and sentenced to life in prison. In 1998, Lopez was declared sane and released from prison for good behavior, despite protests from the families of his victims. His current whereabouts are unknown, and he is believed to have returned to Colombia. Pedro Alonso Lopez's case stands as one of the most chilling examples of serial murder in South America. If you like this video, please like the video and subscribe to my channel.